Underrated is a word that I see get thrown around a lot in the gaming space, and it's not hard to see why. Sometimes it's easy to forget the larger world and only see the world around you. I don't know if it's the online gamers' incessant need to be part of something the masses don't know about, or just a sense of inclusionism the human race loves to feel. But I feel like I hear the term underrated thrown around on games that no one would really disagree with. Games that are well liked or just not all that special are suddenly underrated gems. But when I say underrated today, I mean it with complete earnesty. Nintendo has a lot of franchises that don't get the attention they deserve as much as they should. Mario, Zelda, Kirby, Pokemon. Unless you are one of those four, your position as a Nintendo franchise classic/priority is in the air. We've seen it time and time again, franchises oft forgotten about. Rhythm Heaven, Metroid, Star Fox. While regarded by many fans as Nintendo classics, they are often underappreciated by their corporate overlords. But what if I told you that there was a Nintendo franchise that was overwhelmingly great, that has a depressing, melancholy story, that has 4 games in its lineup, and most importantly, that hasn't been forgotten by its dear daddy Nintendo? Well, that series exists, and its name is BoxBoy. Developed by HAL Laboratories in an effort to harken back to the simplistic days of Kirby's earliest outings, they came up with the idea of just using boxes to traverse puzzles. And while this game started as a Kirby game, they very quickly realized that Kirby and producing boxes don't really mix as well as they'd hoped. This led to a simplistic world with simplistic gameplay and an overall simplistic premise. But it manages to be deep in application. BoxBoy has 4 games spanning 2 consoles, and they're all essentially building on the same concept: creating boxes that are the same shape and size as your body, and how that can be applied in a multitude of ways across a series of puzzles. The first game has you doing just that. In the second game, you can make 2 sets of boxes. In the third game, you get some special boxes that have different properties to them. And in the fourth game, you get 2 characters who can make boxes independently of each other, as well as a character who's not completely square, adding way more depth to the puzzles that can be done with these boxes. It's a simplistic system that can be applied in a mind-numbing amount of different possible outcomes. Several people have praised games like Mario Galaxy for their ability to always have some new gameplay ready, praise being shown for having so many different game ideas and never exploring them more than they have to avoid letting it get stale. Well, this idea also carries over to BoxBoy. Every game has a core gimmick, yes, some spin on the box creation formula that gives each game an identity of sorts, but within these games, that same logic I mentioned a second ago applies. There are so many different ideas that this game throws into the mix, and they never sit long enough for you to get sick of them. For the most part, each world has a gimmick, and you don't really see that gimmick again till the bonus worlds in the end, in which point they mix them all together anyways. This vast wealth of level design makes these games feel like one long experience as opposed to several small games. And don't be fooled, these are shorter games. On how long to beat, each one chalks at about 10 hours for full completionist, and that stands to reason with my own time in the games as well. But with that short length comes a great positive. These games are nigh impossible to burn out on. Unless you decide to marathon them all at once, they each have their own niche within their small realm of box creation. My biggest negative is that it takes a while for each game to pick up. The first 3 worlds of each game are impeccably easy in comparison to the difficulty that comes from the later worlds of each game. And yes, I said difficulty. HAL Laboratories, or more specifically Kirby, is known for making games that lack challenge and are a breeze for the player. But BoxBoy doesn't fall into that category. Of course, difficulty is subjective, especially for a puzzle game, but some of these puzzles had me head-scratching for long periods of time. Way more so than you'd expect from a game that looks like this. And speaking of that, the looks. As stated earlier, this game was meant to harken back to the days of the NES and Game Boy Classic. So they gave it a monochromatic art style and simplistic character designs. And oh my god, are these character designs adorable. I really love the look of Kirby in particular. He's literally just a square with 2 dots and legs, yet he manages to express so much personality with no dialogue. He is adorable, and look at his amiibo. Now look at the price tag. Now look at my face with anguish knowing I'll never have him. These designs are remarkably simple, but manage to be adorable regardless, kinda like another HAL character. The simplistic art style also lends a lot of benefits to the game's home system, the 3DS. A lot of 3DS games look pretty gross when they're trying to attempt an art style that isn't meant for the system, like Kid Icarus Uprising. Great game, but really would have benefited from the power a more traditional console can give you. Even the best looking 3DS games look really bleh once you take them off the 3DS screen. But with the simplistic art style BoxBoy has, it never really looks bad. There are parts that look a bit murkier than others, but the simplistic art style never makes you feel the limitations of the 3DS, and that's always a plus in my books. Even playing it today when there's a BoxBoy game on the Switch, it looks as great as ever. The series is monochromatic throughout most of the first game, but that means the few times they do use color, it's that much more special. And then throughout the next games, you see the color seeping more and more into the world around you. It's a design choice that may look incredibly shallow at first, but as you go through the game's story, it begins to make more and more sense. And that brings me to the story. And well, honestly, while it mostly takes a backseat to the other things this game has to offer, I really don't want to spoil it. I mentioned earlier that it was dark and melancholic, and it's true, it is, and that might be a spoiler on its own. Looking at the characters and the world the game has presented you, it's hard to tell how the game is going to turn out that way, but when you get there, you kind of just have this empty feeling in your stomach. So, for those who are interested, go and experience it for yourself. I don't want to take that moment away from you more than I already have. And you know what? Even if you don't want to know the game's story, play it anyways. It's small, it's cheap, it's short, and you won't be losing much to try it. First game is $5, and if you don't love it, it's $5. And if you do love it, you have 3 more games, also at lower than average prices, to sink your teeth into. And if you're anything like me, you will be hooked. And if you are hooked on this video, then why don't you subscribe, ring the bell, like this video, and comment what Nintendo franchise you think deserves more of a spotlight. Nintendo is one of the few gaming companies that has so many IPs that people perceive as one of the big guys, but very rarely do they all get to shine together. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think are the best of the neglected. But before you do any of that, I have been RV Rocks, and thank you so much for watching. See ya!